the time has finally come. It has been another year. The year 2024 has come to a close, which means it is time to talk about the 10 best albums of the year 2024. This is the list, the one place you need to go. Get out of here, Fantano. Move over, Brad, Taste of Music. Who even watches Todd in the Shadows anymore? None of those people matter. This is the one place you need to come for the best albums of the year. But a quick disclaimer, this is a personal favorites list. This is not necessarily an objective best music of the year list. I like lists better this way because you get a lot more varied recommendations than what you see on all the other year-end lists. So this is a personal favorites list to me, and hopefully you will like some of these too. And man, 2024 was just an incredible year for music. To put in perspective how good of a year it was, I did a video 6 months ago of the top 10 albums so far, and there's so much good music has come out. Most of those albums didn't stay in my top 10. So if you're digging the music I recommend in this video, I would also suggest going back and watching that one because all of those albums are still incredible too, so you might get even more recommendations. But real quick, since it was such a great year, I'm gonna flash my honorable mentions on the screen real quick. You could pause and check out any of those if you want, but I'm keeping this list to a tight 10, the top 10 albums of 2024. Let's get into it. Now, my number 10 spot was the hardest to decide because it was a neck and neck tight race between 4 different hip hop albums. Tyler the Creator's Chromacopia, Cause, The Thief Next to Jesus, Kendrick Lamar's GNX, and 2093 by Yeat. And I love all these albums so much. Tyler the Creator, really personal album, but still has all of his amazing production. The Thief Next to Jesus by Ka, just amazing sampling, really thoughtful lyrics. GNX, of course, also has the Kendrick thoughtful lyrics, but it was unique because Kendrick was prioritizing bangers more than he has in any other album in his career. But thinking through it, I have to speak my truth. I know this is going to make people mad, but number 10 is 2093 by Yeat. And I could hear the haters right now. I could hear everyone being like, what do you mean? You think Yeat's a better artist than Kendrick Lamar? And no, I don't. But this being a personal top 10 albums, Yeat just hit a stride with 2093. 2093 is a slight departure from what he normally does. It is a loose concept album about this sci-fi dystopian world that he occupies. And I've called this hip hop's Blade Runner, and I still think it's an apt way to describe it. It has some of the most innovative and futuristic production I've heard. And when you mix that with a lot of the unique ways that Yeat does vocals and melds his vocals and ad-libs into the instrumental, they all come together so effectively on this album. 2093 is just an album you could get lost in. It feels like a cinematic experience. You put on the headphones and you are instantly transported to this futuristic world, this dark dystopian, and you enter the mind of this character that has bought the earth and is ruling the world with an iron fist, looking down from his throne. And the main critique of the album is that it is long, and that was my main critique of it too. Like, 2093 is just an album that has grown on me. The more and more I listen to it, the more I hear it, its length becomes less of an issue and more of one of its strengths. Because if you're going to sit with the record, it really allows you to disappear into the world. And the more I listen to it, the less the songs all sound the same. You start to notice the different production choices in each one. Yeat has always been an artist that makes really creative choices, and it's nice to hear him do that in the context of trying to make an entire concept album as opposed to just banger after banger after banger. If you are new to Yeat or haven't really grasped gravitated toward Yeet in the past, this is a great album to start with. And when I need to convince people to listen to this album, somebody made an edit of the song If We're Being Real to the Dune trailer, and it further solidifies that this is a cinematic sci-fi epic of an album, and it kind of helps it click for a lot of people. It's the perfect thing to turn on when you're doing work or you're doing chores, or if you have a really long drive at night in some less than ideal driving conditions. This will make you feel like you're driving a fucking spaceship. But moving on to something completely different, my number 9 is The Great American Bar Scene by Zach Bryan. 2024 was obviously a huge year for country music, with established artists getting bigger, new artists coming up, and almost every single pop artist making at least one country crossover. But Zach Bryan just remains as one of the most interesting new voices in country. He manages to take country back to its roots with great storytelling, sad or sentimental lyrics, and completely live instruments. I have a lot of thoughts about why country music might be making the comeback that it is. You could certainly say that since we're swinging back into a more Trump America, the country as a whole seems to be getting more conservative. That might be the reason that this southern-rooted music is coming back. But I do think there's more to it than that. I feel like with hip-hop being the predominant genre for so long, so much of what we've been hearing is just the same sequence trap drums, and you combine that with coming out of the pandemic, just this sense of loneliness and shattering of community. I think it makes perfect sense that people are gravitating back toward music with more live instruments and kind of messy, off-the-grid production. And I feel like that's what is making Zach Bryan succeed so well. His music is just the opposite of robotic, and you could feel multiple people coming together to create this music. And he's just such an effective storyteller as well. I love the title track, 28's, American Nights. Bass Boats is a huge storytelling highlight. Even got the boss Bruce Springsteen on this. My favorite song is still Pink Skies, just a song about him being at a funeral and how sad that could be, but also how uplifting it could be to remember someone's life and come together with family and remember how great this person was. I also love the feature that's added in the album version. Every once in a while, an artist comes around and it feels like they're just an evil robot with one objective, which is to make great music. And even if they're terrible in every other aspect of their life, it's kind of hard to deny how good the music is. Just saying that to say, if you're invested in the Barstool scene and all the drama, I get not listening to this album, but it's undeniable that Zach Bryan is doing something special. And I really hope that this trend of live instruments, passionate storytelling lyrics continue, even if it's not him that you're listening to, that we support more artists like this, because this is what country used to be. This is the country music I fell in love with, and I like a bunch of pop country too. I freaking love the Twister soundtrack, but I want people to know that there are multiple ways of making music in this genre. So that's my number 9. And at number 8, we have I Lay Down My Life for You by JPEG Mafia. And man, JPEG just really snapped with this one. He's an artist that's known for his unique and creative production. And I feel like he manages to both innovate and push his sound further in new directions while also making what might be his most accessible album yet. I think one of the most special things about this is he incorporates a lot of rock elements into this, but it's not rock rap like you've typically heard it before. It's not like Limp Bizkit, it's not like Linkin Park, but it's also not like anything emo trap either. It's its own special thing, and it is intense. It gets your blood pumping. Sen Miendo both having these intense distorted rock guitars and a 2 Live Crew sample is just the perfect example of the marriage of all these genres. Let's see, what else is there? He samples Logan Roy in Secession on Don't Rely on Other Men in a really creative way. We get him and Denzel Curry trading bars, which is always a great time. He gets really, like, probably the most personal and introspective if he's ever been on the last two songs, one of them featuring Steven Spielberg's daughter. So that's, you know, that's fun. But yeah, as someone that's known mainly for his experimental production, hearing this side of him, hearing him get this personal and lyrical, it just shows that he's the total package when it comes to what a great artist is. And finally, the last thing to touch on, the most popular song on this album, and probably the one I've listened to the most too, Either On or Off the Drugs, has one of the most creative samples. It's sampling an AI generated soul remix of a Future song. Like, someone took an older Future song, Turn on the Lights, put it into an AI generator and said, make this into a 70s blues song. And then JPEG Mafia takes the 70s blues song, and that's the sample that's playing throughout the record. It's so creative and weird, but it works so well. And you almost think that it's just something he found crate digging, but AI has become such a weird thing, and most of the art that's made with AI is underwhelming or is just pure slop. But it's nice to know that there are some creative things you could do with it. This whole project just makes me so excited. I think this is the best rap album of the year. And at number 7, we have Russell Boring by Joba. And I brought this up in a recent video about Brockhampton, but Joba, of course, is a former member of the all-American hip-hop boy band Brockhampton. And it's been really fun since this has been the year that most of the group's solo projects are starting to come out. But out of all of them, Joba stands out as the most confident and sure of himself with his new artistic direction. Joba was always the most artistically eccentric of the group. He was the wild card. You never knew what he was going to sound like when he hopped on a song, and very true to form. This album sounds completely different than almost everything that Brockhampton did. Russell Boring is a piano rock album, and just, all the songs are just beautiful. I don't really know what else to say about it. Song after song, he just brings together this beautiful collage of live instruments. Again, like similar to the Zach Bryan thing, it's really cool just hearing everything live and not necessarily like stuck on a grid. Like he was in the band, Joba's vocals are all over the place in that he has some very weird inflections and characteristics to it, and the song American Fever specifically took me a little bit to come around to, but the instruments are so beautiful, the lyrics are so interesting that eventually I came around to it, and his vocals are one of my favorite parts about it. Ghost is a great song. People Need People is a great song. The closer, Gospel of the Moon, is great. I think Lone Star is still my favorite of the bunch. But yeah, if you just want to hear an exceptionally produced, just an album that is performed with such fervor and passion, Joba's really wearing his heart on his sleeve. He's saying everything with his entire chest. And this album is just so beautiful and uplifting from front to back. If that's what you're looking for in your music, then I highly recommend you check this out. And at number 6, we have Heavy Metal by Cameron Winter. Cameron Winter is the lead singer of the band Geese, which, if you haven't heard them, they're one of the most exciting rock bands out right now. They have a great album called 3D Country, and they also have an incredible cover of Baby by Justin Bieber. But Heavy Metal is the singer's solo project, and it takes less of a rock direction and more of a folk direction, I guess. I don't really know exactly what to call this genre. I mean, it feels folky, but there's a lot of experimentation at the same time. But what's immediately going to stand out to you about this is Cameron Winter just has a one-of-a-kind voice. He's, I think, only like 20 years old or something, but he has the voice of someone a lot older that has just seen a lot of shit. I was reading some reviews of this album, and someone said he has the type of voice that anything he says is going to sound poetic, and I have to agree with that. I love the writing on this project, but this album only came out at the top of December, and I would be lying if I said I knew what every single song meant. Like, I still haven't decided what I think Cancer of the Skull means, but the way that he sings it I know it's gotta mean something. It sounds important. Yeah, I love the song $0, where he feels like a $0 man, and you really feel that dejection in his voice. There's a lot of kind of mellower, sad sounding songs on this, but the song Nautica especially, it's really upbeat and it's really nice and easy to listen to. He dips into this high register of his voice that kind of sounds like Bon Iver when he sings high. But yeah, I was just blown away with what a bold direction this album takes, how it manages to make folk music feel experimental, and just the heft and the weight of this guy's voice. You can't help but to be intrigued by what this guy has going on. And at number 5, we have Manning Fireworks by MJ Lenderman. MJ Lenderman, one of the most exciting up-and-coming songwriters and also a member of the band Wednesday, but this album really took off for him, and with great reason. Manning Fireworks is this indie singer-songwriter, but also country-infused record. It explores this very specific male archetype that we're seeing more and more of really creatively. Manning Fireworks kind of manages to comment on the male loneliness epidemic, but also the lonely to alt-right pipeline, the Joe Roganification of politics, like all of these things. But again, like in a very poetic way. He's not making an outright statement or coming to any conclusion about any of these things. He's just really interested in these people and is painting portraits of these different characters. The common thread throughout all of these is all of the men in these songs are very lonely and desperately want connection, but at the same time, most of them, like, it is their fault that they're alone. And there are varying degrees to this. The title track is definitely trying to paint the portrait of an unlikable guy. He said in an interview that the song Wristwatch is directly inspired by Brendan Schaub, which is hilarious. But none of these songs are too judgmental, and a song like Joker Lips paints a way more empathetic picture. Like, I think Joker Lips is the best written song of the year. It manages to paint a very specific portrait of a very specific person without outright saying anything. Instead of saying the text, it paints with subtext by pointing out specific moments or qualities in this guy's life, and it allows you to fill in the rest of the painting yourself, which is so effective. And MJ Lenderman has a really humorous way of writing, which is what everyone seems to love about this album. Joker Lips paints this portrait of a man that's not exceptional at anything, which, you know, isn't great, but by definition, not everyone can be exceptional. And the way life is going, and in late stage capitalism, in this meritocracy we're in, if you aren't exceptional at anything, the lives of average, just mediocre getting by people is getting worse and worse. And this guy's life just kind of sucks. And he might be an asshole, but it reminds me of the line in Parasite where they're talking about how nice the rich people are. And one of the poor people says that, hey, if I had that much money, I'd be nice too. And I think the reverse is true. Like, if my life was this bad, I'd probably be an asshole too. So you have this portrait of a guy whose life is underwhelming. He's not great at anything, and he's miserable, and he's becoming bitter, but he still is longing for love, but all he has is his TV. And all of that is said with only snapshots, with snippets of moments here and there, which is what makes the song and what makes this whole album so great. MJ Lenderman is so effective at having these witty, simple one-liners that carry so much meaning behind them and make you laugh too. Like, we sat under a half-mast McDonald's flag. Houseboat docked at the Himbo Dome. Please don't laugh. Only half what I said was a joke. I wouldn't be in the seminary if I could be with you. Just All of these are so funny, but are so meaningful too. And it's also just such a great blend of easygoing rock with this nice country flair. MJ Lenderman is from Asheville, North Carolina, which is just a little over an hour from where I live. And it's really cool seeing music from there starting to be big. Like, this music really does feel like my hometown, like the places I've grown up in and lived my entire life. And on that note, also, the city he's from, Asheville, got hit really bad by Hurricane Helene. Some of my favorite places to go to were just completely wiped out by the hurricane. And not just Asheville, but very specifically, a lot of the smaller towns surrounding Asheville in the mountains of North Carolina are still not doing great. They were completely wiped out. A lot of major important roads to get into those towns are just gone, and the rebuilding process is still going on and is still going to take a long time. So if you want to help, I have some links in the description to where you could help out. And at number 4, we have Brat by Charli XCX. I mean, this shirt was probably a spoiler for that, but what else is there to say about Brat? I mean, it's one of the most talked about, culturally significant albums of this year, and with very good reason. A great dance, club, pop album with really effective, sometimes experimental production, but always accessible. And despite being so danceable and pop, it manages to have a lot of depth and meaning in the lyrics. Charli's been an incredible artist for a while, but she's managed with this to have her breakout cultural zeitgeist moment, and it couldn't have happened to a better project. Since it's been talked about so much, I'll keep it brief here, but if you want to hear my deeper thoughts, I made a video comparing this album and Chromacopia by Tyler, the Creator, which you could check out. But essentially the thesis of that video essay is this is an album kind of about turning 30 and entering like the next stage of adulthood, and all of the questions and insecurities that come with that. Insecurities about your place in the world, your career. Are you doing enough? Should I continue pursuing my passions? Do I want to have kids right now? Do I even want to be alive at all? You know, like, all of this is in this album, but it's still a really fun dance record, and it's amazing how she could pull that off. But since I talked about all that at length in another video you could watch, I'll say real quick right now that the remix album that is also attached to the deluxe edition of this is probably the best remix album I've ever heard. So good, it redefines what a remix album can be. It's not enough that Charli made one of the best albums of the year, but in the deluxe, she turns around and she makes an entirely separate album that is in conversation with what the first album is. Like, some of those remix songs barely sound like the original edition, but the lyrics and themes are the exact same. But Charli's now approaching those themes with new perspectives and is kind of updating us on where she's at with those themes post the success of that album and how her life has changed after Brat became what it was. And she has such good taste with the features too. And the remix edition of Brat doesn't have to be a dance album through and through. Like, you get some really calm moments with the 1975 and Bon Iver. And she's drained. We get Young Lean and we get Blade on a mainstream pop album. I love that. Charli's the best doing it in pop music right now. The rollout, the remix album rollout, all the creative marketing, the iconic cover art. Finally, a few days before recording this video, Charli's Letterboxd account leaked, and I'm a filmmaker. Film is my main thing, and Charli has incredible taste. I'm scrolling through her Letterboxd activity, and I could feel my relationship with Charli becoming more and more parasocial. I am now convinced that we would be great friends, but even if we met and we became bitter enemies, Brat is still incredible. But that's enough of that. At number 3, we have Petrichor by 070 Shake. And this is an album I don't hear enough people talking about, but I think it's incredible. Petrichor is a kind of post-hip-hop, post-R&B kind of experimental album. If you're familiar with 070 Shake, she's been making this kind of moody music for a while, but I really feel like this is where she's really hit a stride. Her music's always had strong production, it's always had great vocals, but what's different about Petrichor is there is a very focused direction in the writing. On top of that, she just takes a lot more risks and big swings with the instrumentals, but it all comes together really cohesively because of the writing direction. This is just a really passionate but dark and sexy, almost lustful album. And I don't know the exact timeline of the creation of this album, but it sure seems like at least most of these songs are written about her now girlfriend Lily Rose Depp, which, if you're unfamiliar with 070 Shake but you've seen the Nosferatu movie, it will make perfect sense that this was an album by someone that loves and is writing about the lead actress of Nosferatu. Similar to the Yeet album, it just throws you into its own immersive world. Petrichor is the word for the smell of the earth after it rains, and you kind of can't smell this album almost. It smells like rain. It's about this couple that loves each other so passionately, and sometimes they aren't great for each other, sometimes they butt heads, sometimes they go through difficult things, but they manage to come out on top, and the love enters like a kind of more calm, balanced equilibrium by the end of it. I don't really want to spoil all the different swings that this album takes. I also don't know how effectively I could even describe some of the more specific sounds, but the production is so unique. It's so varied. It has this ability to just suck you in. I try to listen to just one song on this album and I end up listening to the whole thing twice over. That's the type of music this is. Even with the JT feature on this, I go back and forth on whether I actually like it, but part of me still is glad that it's there, that they went for something like that. Courtney Love appears on this. That's really cool, but there's no need for a lot of features. 070 Shake's voice is just so unique, and it's really used to its best ability here. It was leaked that at least one of these songs was potentially going to be on one of Kanye's Vultures albums, and it's probably for the best that it ended up here, but it makes a lot of sense that this is coming from a Kanye protege. It's just such a futuristic, forward-thinking, innovative, dark, moody, immersive album about love, and I love it. At number 2, I have Scrapyard by Quadeca. Quadeca, probably my favorite artist out right now. If you saw my Spotify rap video, the guy I listen to the most. And Scrapyard is such a unique project. I talked about this in my halfway through the year video, but essentially these are a lot of songs he made while creating his past 2 albums, but since they were concept albums, they didn't quite fit for whatever reason, so he put them on here. And what you get is this wild collage of a lot of different musical styles and directions, and it's a very inconsistent album, but inconsistent in like the best way possible. Like it still somehow all comes together. You have these fuzzy, otherworldly, almost like dash of shoegazy songs. A la carte, I've described as if Conor Oberst made hip hop, but like best possible version of that. He dips back into his rap roots. Too Many Friends has a piano beat. I Make It Look Effortless. Guess Who are more like modern, almost rage songs. Guess Who has incredible lyricism. Guide Dog is a beautiful acoustic guitar ballad, and Texas Blue is still my favorite, like number 1 song of the year. But finally, if I have anything to add that I haven't said about Scrapyard already, I dove more into Phil Elverum, into Mount Eerie and the microphones this year, and you could see very clear influence of those projects in Scrapyard and a lot of what Quadeca does, but that really doesn't take away anything from these projects. Like, again, it's like he made Mount Eerie's most recent album, but if it was hip hop inspired, he manages to combine all these genres in such a unique way that only he can, and they end up being something completely new entirely. Like, it's so interesting seeing what people that grew up listening to Kendrick Lamar and Kid Cudi and Playboy Carti that start to get into these more ambitious music nerd type artists do with that entire collection of influences. But my number one favorite album of 2024 is Country by Medium Build, which is a change from before because halfway through the year I had Scrapyard at 1 and this at 2, but throughout the course of the year this eventually won me over. And this is really pretty different than everything else on this list. Like, it's not very experimental at all. It's an indie singer-songwriter album, but it's not rough around the edges the same way Zach Bryan is. It's still a very polished and tightly produced and mastered album. But what really wins me over with Country is just simply the songwriting. Country is an album that, kind of similar to Brat, is an album about getting older and getting into your 30s and all of the different complicated feelings that come with that. Looking to the past, remembering how you got here, longing for love that you don't have in your life, but also realizing that time is slipping away. You don't have quite the same majority of your life ahead of you that you once did. You're starting to settle into what your life is actually going to be and who you actually are as a person. And what if you're at this crossroads where you aren't quite happy with what this is, or you pictured it going a different way? Like, these are things that are explored on Country and really effectively. In My Room is about a quiet kid and all of the magical things that could happen in your room when you keep to yourself, but also all the complicated feelings that young people are going through. Crying Over You feels like the perfect breakup song to me, even though it isn't really about a breakup. It's just about missing a person. Hey Sandra is really heartbreaking song, how that plays out, but it's cutting through the country. Can't Be Cool Forever, Known by None, that really stand out to me, that really grapple with a lot of complicated feelings. And that's what makes Country the best album of the year for me, is despite there being more creatively produced records, despite there being records that have had bigger moments culturally, Medium Build is just so raw and emotional on this album. He has so many big feelings and he performs them big and boldly. And when someone is willing to talk about the things that are hard to talk about, that can sometimes be embarrassing or conflicting or difficult to even verbalize, when somebody says those things and says them loudly with their whole chest, it gives everyone else the permission to kind of openly feel those feelings too. And that energy is just unmatched. Like, I saw Medium Build live this year, and it really stood out, especially compared to the openers. Not to diss the openers, but how they performed just with their guitar singing versus Medium Build coming out and just shouting with his entire body, like head to toe. He is screaming these lyrics. There's just so much feeling. And in a moment where, AI is rising, technology is ruling more of our lives, and it feels like the whole world is becoming less human, this is really refreshing. Also, fun fact about this album, I made a hip hop remix of the song Crying Over You, and Medium Build saw it and shared it on Instagram, which was really cool. I made that song while in the waiting room trying to get my car fixed, which was a really stressful moment in time, and the footage from the music video is actually footage I collected from my 30th birthday. That is the day I turned 30. I decided to just record the entire day. I ended up having a lot of work to do, and it rained the entire day. And that night was when Hurricane Helene hit. So like literally my 30th birthday was probably the saddest day of the year for almost everyone in my state. And then after the power went out everywhere, I didn't celebrate with anyone. Overall, it felt like a really sad day, and I thought the footage looked so sad I might not even put this out. But yeah, that's just life. It made that day so much better that it led to the video that Medium Build and so many other people saw. And one more thing I want to add, Medium Build also released a 5-song EP called Marietta, which very much feels like an extension of this album. Like, if Medium Build was a rapper, these songs would probably be added to the Country Deluxe Edition. The Marietta EP deals with a lot of the same themes, but it's more hyper-focused just on looking at the past and how you grew up and your relationship with your family and your hometown. John and Lydia is another one of the best written songs you're going to hear from this year. It's about him and his mother, and if they were born at the same time and were the same age, would they be friends? Would they like each other? It's such an interesting thought, and I love where the song takes it. And finally, Yoke featuring Julian Baker is about growing up very religious and some of the baggage that could come with that, and your views changing and your relationships with people that were religious and still are. And as someone else that grew up very religious in the South, a lot of what is in that song really resonates with me. And it's not stuff that a lot of people are really open and talk about a lot. So yeah, the Marietta EP just further solidified for me that Country by Medium Build is my favorite album of the year. I'm just really grateful that this album exists, that this artist exists, and he put all this out there. It was the perfect album to have the year I turned 30, but beyond that, just the perfect album for this year in general. So if you haven't heard it, highly recommend you check it out. Again, this was a personal favorites list, not like an objective best of list. And looking at it, I could kind of see some through lines in all the music I gravitated toward this year. Like, I either wanted experimental, immersive, futuristic production, or live instruments and very human, open, and honest writing, which really kind of describes what the year was for me. It was this constant pull of escapism or seeking connection. And there's so much other great music out there that didn't make this list. But yeah, I feel like I wanted to either be immersed in someone else's world or have music that made me feel part of a community. Like, both all these different musicians coming together to play these live instruments, but also lyrics that are so honest, they make you feel like you're less alone. I feel like, yeah, with a world that's getting more digital and divided and robotic, like, those are the types of things that we need in the world, which is why making music is so important. And that is it for my top 10 albums of 2024. I know there's a whole lot of incredible music that did not make this list, so let me know in the comments. I legitimately want to know what your top 10 favorite albums of the year were, so leave those down below and I'll check out any that I haven't heard. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me everywhere at Robert2_Isaac. I'm also a filmmaker, and you can follow my filmmaking channel at Written by Pod. I am gearing up for my next big short film, which is called Locked In. I've talked about it in other videos, so I'm not going to give the whole spiel right now because this video is getting long, but I have a link to a pitch video in the description if you want to know more about that film. We'll be launching a crowdfunding campaign soon. But yeah, subscribe if you want to see more videos. Let me know what your favorite albums of the year were, and I'll see you next time.